Sloan. I am an astronomer. When I was about 10, I didn't quite have it figured out at that point what it was I was getting myself into, but I kind of stuck with that plan, all the way through high school. I stayed interested. I chose my major in college, and unlike most people, I didn't switch my major. And so, yeah, a long time ago. It seemed kind of like a cool thing to be doing. I guess at the time, I liked science fiction, and I remember when I was at school, I would read, the Weekly Reader was like a little news thing that they would distribute in class, every couple of weeks or something, I don't know. And they always have things about, scientists, studying dolphins and stuff, and it all seemed really kind of neat. And it struck me as far more interesting than going into the business world and just making money and spending it and dying. So, what is science? Well, I teach this, right? I teach the answer to that very question. Science is a process. It's a different way of thinking about things, so that you can. So it's a disciplined way of thinking about things, and sifting data, and trying to understand the things that you can observe, so that you can kind of reach conclusions about what it is that we're living in this world. How is my field beneficial to the academic world? I remember once I asked, when I was an undergraduate, I sort of in one of these moods, and I asked my advisor, who was kind of a cranky old man, great guy, Bill Buscombe. I asked him about this, and he goes, "Why? What's the point to astronomy? Why do we do this?" And he's like, he looked at me and he raised his eyebrows and said, "Get people's minds out of the gutter," is what he said. And that's sort of kind of a glib way of putting it. But I think the point to astronomy is that if you want to understand who you are as a person, you got to understand what it is to be a person. You kind of want to be grounded a little bit, So we live on Earth. What does that mean? Are people common? Are they rare? Is this a special series of events that put us here? Or, all these things. And so I think ultimately science is, understanding the world is all about understanding ourselves. And that's kind of what we're in the business of doing, is we're trying to figure out the outside, and people can take that and use that to kind of ground themselves and figure out more about who they are and what's important and significant about them. And that's sort of the broad philosophical sweep, I guess. More specifically, there's all these businesses of testing technology and technology transfer, but that's not why we do this. To teen, they're part of the general population, I think, that gets to absorb the things that we're figuring out. It makes me sound important. I'm not really that important. There's a lot of really bright astronomers doing lots of really cool things. Yeah. I just sort of got my own little niche. I mean, it's just the more we understand about the universe and about the Earth and its place in it, the more we can understand about ourselves. That's sort of the way I look at it. I mean, to be more specific, one of the lessons that I think it's important to understand is that the Earth is a fairly fragile place, and it's fairly unique. And what makes it so special to us is something that we need to understand that. And there's a lot of issues coming up right now regarding global climate change and what humans are doing to affect that. And I think that most people looking at this objectively can see the impact of human civilization on the climate, and then the changes in the climate and that impact back on human civilization. So, sort of like we depend on this planet for our survival. So, in one sense, astronomers are sort of helping us build an instruction manual as to how to use the planet and take care of it. Well, we live in America, right? Which means that everybody really cares about what you do for a living. There's a real strong identity, in this country at least, in terms of your career and who you are. So I'm an astronomer. That works out well for me because it's great fun. And as soon as I say that, people kind of have an idea that, kind of like I get paid to sort of pursue my curiosity about things, which is great. Sort of one of those things. They teach it in school, you learn it, then you get, like I said, the Weekly Reader was fun. Maybe somebody out there who actually did this decades ago can take some pride in the fact that the thing that was cool was that you could see that science isn't something that they just teach you it's not just a textbook that you open up with all of these facts, right? It's a process. the facts are changing as people dig a little bit deeper, and the explanations we will see have to change. And so I think I figured out fairly early that this was something that was really active, and I kind of took an interest in it. When I first said I wanted to be an astronomer, so I had this vision that I would be, looking through telescopes and developing plates, and then looking at these plates to see what was on them. But that's not how things go at all, right? It's all computerized now, and these days you don't. I mean, most of my observations are with a satellite, so I don't even. I'm not. I sleep. Satellite does its thing, right? What I do now and what I thought I was going to be doing are kind of different. So, work with NASA extensively. It's mostly NASA funding that pays my salary, so it goes to Cornell, and then Cornell writes me a check. I actually worked directly I worked on a NASA research center for a few years in the 90s, and work with NASA pretty closely. They work with me, life is good. But I don't have any interest in being an astronaut, because to be an astronaut would involve, I wouldn't be able to be an astronomer anymore. There's not enough time to train to do one, you still do the other. Sort of a famous story of an astronaut from long ago, Carl Hinneis. He was the first astronomer astronaut, and he was a very bright astronomer, very productive, and did a lot of really good things. There's all these objects, Hinneis catalogs, and we refer to Hinneis 1383, all these different objects from these catalogs that he put together in the late 50s and early 60s. And then he became an astronaut around 1970, and that was kind of the end of his science career. So he wasn't an astronomer anymore. And he trained and he trained and he trained, and he went up in space like once for a week in the 80s, maybe twice, but that was it. That's quite a sacrifice. And sort of watching what happened to him, I realized early on that no, I don't want to make that sacrifice. So I'm happy to work for NASA as an astronomer. And another career choice, yeah, I'd probably want to be a writer. I mean, I do that anyway. I write lots of scientific papers, and I give, I teach occasionally, so I have a chance to try to communicate with students, what is so awesome about this, why it's so important. And so I probably try to write to convey that same message. In fact, my suspicion is I'll probably get around to that at some point anyway. So, no, this is way too much fun.
Okay.
I mean, think about it, right? NASA puts together these billion-dollar satellites, and I get to use them, right? Or somebody builds a $10–20 million telescope, and if I can successfully compete with a good idea to what to observe, I get to go to that telescope and observe it. I mean, there's a lot of fun to this. There really is. It's a lot of work. Don't get me wrong, but it's a blast. When things go well, it's great. Who would be good to be an astronomer?
Yeah.
Well, you need to be mathematically proficient. You got to be good at math, because ultimately, astronomy is physics, and physics is math, right? So that's the big thing. If it's a tough thing too, because I think people are a lot better at mathematics than they think they are. That's sort of at some point as people kind of go, I think as you go from middle school into high school, somehow people start to convince themselves that, oh, they can't do this. This is just too tedious and too much. But it's the heart of it, because it's the language that we use to understand all these relationships between all the different things that we can measure. And the other point too is if you're mathematically proficient, then there's all these career options available to you besides astronomy. I mean, I'm thinking of engineering, a lot of engineering fields, a lot of other science fields that just aren't there. So I think that people should really be careful about limiting their career options. I think the mathematics is it's so important. So anyway, that's the key. And the other key is curiosity, and also at this level at least the ability to you got to read a lot so that you can figure out what we have figured out and also what we haven't, because that's the leverage, right? If you know what we don't know, and you can figure out how to get at that, then you can develop research projects, and then you can be successful as an astronomer.
Thank you so much.